Meadowlark Creeks was known for its sweeping lawns, white picket fences, and stately homes spaced along gently winding roads. Every street boasted sidewalks lined with tasteful shrubs and decorative mailboxes. Visitors often remarked that the neighborhood looked like something out of a magazine, an image carefully curated by the Meadowlark Creeks Homeowners Association, HOA. Many who settled here enjoyed the sense of order. The HOA maintained a lovely community pool, well-trimmed green belts, and a clubhouse for gatherings. However, amid this well-kept setting, an undercurrent of tension always existed. Some felt the rules were too controlling or the fines too strict for minor infractions, like a slightly overgrown hedge. Usually, small disputes got resolved quietly. Yet one resident took it upon herself to push beyond official guidelines. Virginia Arnett, though practically everyone knew her by the private nickname, Karen. Middle-aged, always impeccably dressed, with an aura of rigid propriety, she roamed the subdivision day after day, scanning for anything that might offend her sense of aesthetic. If she caught a child's bicycle leaning near a driveway or a neighbor's trash bin set out too early, she'd pounce with either a scowl or a note referencing the HOA bylaws. She was not even on the HOA board officially. She had never been elected. Yet she acted as if she outranked them all, imposing her will at every opportunity. Most neighbors found ways to avoid direct clashes with Karen. They complied with her suggestions, eager to dodge the hassle. But her controlling approach loomed over everyone, like a hawk patrolling for prey. In her mind, Meadowlark Creeks was supposed to be a postcard of perfection, no matter how unkind she had to be to preserve that standard. In the months to come, Karen's controlling instincts would collide with a situation that pitted her obsession for uniform appearances against basic human compassion. The presence of an elderly resident's oxygen tank on his front porch. She would see it as an unsightly blemish on her neighborhood, failing to grasp that it was literally a lifeline. What started as a trivial complaint would soon snowball into a confrontation that tested the entire community's moral compass. Henry Carlisle was a soft-spoken widower, nearing 80, who had lived in Meadowlark Creeks for well over 2 decades. His wife had passed 10 years ago, and since then, Henry resided alone in their cozy single-story home near the southern edge of the subdivision. A retired librarian, he spent his days reading newspapers on his porch, feeding the local birds, or strolling gently around the block with a cane. Lately, Henry's health had declined. Diagnosed with severe COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, he often needed supplemental oxygen. At first, he only required a small portable tank on bad days, but over time, it became an everyday necessity. To reduce the hassle of constantly moving the heavy canister inside and out, Henry settled on keeping the tank on his porch, hooking up a longer hose that snaked inside. That way, he could sit by the front window or step out on the porch whenever he wanted fresh air, without lugging the tank around. His neighbors viewed him with fondness. Some offered to help with groceries or yard tasks. A group of local teens occasionally mowed his lawn for free. Even the official HOA policies had no rule explicitly forbidding medical equipment on porches. After all, the community's founders probably never anticipated such a scenario. Everyone recognized Henry's oxygen tank as a simple extension of his medical needs, not an eyesore. Karen, however, did not see it that way. The first time she spotted the tall green cylinder near Henry's porch bench, she narrowed her eyes. For her, it was an unsightly intrusion. If Henry required oxygen, that was his personal problem, not something the entire neighborhood should witness. In her mind, letting a large oxygen tank be so visible offended the carefully maintained aesthetic. She decided that if the bylaws didn't explicitly ban it, she would push for new enforcement, no matter the moral implications. And so, Henry Carlisle's quiet life, already overshadowed by ill health, was about to be disrupted by a meddling neighbor who valued superficial charm over empathy. The stage was set for a showdown that would rattle Meadowlark Creeks to its core. Karen wasted little time lodging her displeasure with the HOA. She emailed the board members a message titled "Violation, Unapproved Porch Storage," describing Henry's oxygen tank as a tall, industrial-looking cylinder that detracts from Meadowlark Creek's visual harmony. She insisted that it violated the spirit, if not the letter, of guidelines about keeping clutter out of sight. The board members, some of whom had known Henry for years, were taken aback. Marcia Green, the HOA's current president, read the email carefully. Indeed, the official rules covered items like trash bins, bicycles, or large grills, requiring they be stored in garages or behind fences. Medical equipment wasn't mentioned. The typical approach was compassion. If a homeowner needed a ramp, a walker, or an oxygen tank, it was outside the purview of strict compliance. The community valued health accommodations. Yet Karen's complaint was unwavering. She demanded the board force Mr. Carlisle to relocate that tank out of public view. She argued that visitors seeing such medical paraphernalia might question the community's high standards, possibly lowering property values. She typed in bold letters, "If we allow such a glaring eyesore to remain, what precedent do we set for future unapproved items?" Marcia and a few board members discussed the matter informally. They recognized Henry's medical need. None wished to cause him undue stress. However, Karen was known for her relentless campaigning. She might continue hounding them or stirring up other residents, possibly spinning up a vote if the board didn't act. Ultimately, they agreed to speak directly with Henry and see if there was a discreet compromise, maybe some screening or arrangement that satisfied both decency and the neighborhood's norms. Little did they realize how fiercely Karen would push, refusing to accept any middle ground. Her sense of authority, combined with Henry's vulnerability, would soon ignite a wave of indignation from neighbors who believed compassion should trump appearances. A week later, Marcia Green and another board member, Timothy Lowe, visited Henry at his house. Henry welcomed them politely, although standing for too long taxed his breathing. They sat on the porch bench next to the oxygen tank, the rhythmic hiss of air marking each breath Henry took. The green cylinder stood unobtrusively in the corner, but it was indeed visible from the street. Marcia cleared her throat. "Henry, you might have heard we received a complaint about your oxygen tank being on the porch." She winced, hating to bring it up. "We understand you need it. We just wanted to see if there's a possible solution, like maybe moving it behind a small screen or indoors, if feasible." Henry sighed, adjusting his nasal cannula. "I'd be open to something, sure. But the tank's heavy, and I rely on quick access. Dragging it indoors each time I want fresh air is tough with my condition. A screen might be okay, but I have to be careful with ventilation and hazard codes for oxygen. I can't just shove it behind something that's fully enclosed." Timothy nodded sympathetically. "We understand. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. There's no official rule about medical devices, to my knowledge. But you know how it is. Some neighbors are sensitive about appearances." Henry forced a smile. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. Just trying to get by. This is my lifeline." Marcia promised they'd do their best to handle the situation with empathy. She left feeling uneasy. Karen's complaint put them in a bind. The board recognized Henry's right to keep his oxygen accessible, but they also faced pressure from an outspoken resident. They hoped a subtle, polite approach might placate Karen. Yet Henry's dignity was at stake. The man shouldn't be forced to hide an essential device as though it were shameful. Unbeknownst to Henry, rumors of Karen's complaint began circulating among neighbors. Some expressed outrage, calling it heartless. A few offered to help Henry by building a small decorative shield or container. But Karen was not done. She planned a direct confrontation, one that risked humiliating Henry in front of onlookers. One brisk morning, Henry sat on his porch reading the local paper, oxygen hose draped by his side. A gentle breeze rustled the pages. He enjoyed these moments, the chance to watch the sun filter through the neighborhood's maple trees to greet the occasional dog walker passing by. Despite his ailments, it brought a measure of peace. Suddenly, Karen's figure appeared, striding down the sidewalk with that familiar air of authority. Henry offered a polite nod, assuming she'd move on. But Karen stepped onto his walkway, scanning the porch. Her gaze locked on the tank, lips pressed thin. "Good morning," she said stiffly. "I see you still have this large oxygen cylinder out." Henry, a bit startled, replied, "Yes, ma'am. It's my medical supply. I keep it here so I can breathe easily, especially if I want to step outside." Karen's tone turned icy. "Have you considered the effect this has on our community's image? People drive by and see a hospital-like contraption. It lowers the aesthetic and, frankly, property values. It's an eyesore. Couldn't you store it behind a bush or inside your house?" Henry's jaw tightened. Though a gentle soul, he bristled at her insensitivity. "I need immediate access. Carrying it inside each time is difficult." The HOA came by. We're discussing a solution. Karen frowned. I've asked the board to enforce the guidelines. I'd advise you to remove it from plain sight soon, or they might escalate. I'm sure you want to remain in good standing, correct? Henry felt a flush of anger he rarely experienced. I've lived here for 20 years. I've never been out of good standing. This is essential for my health, not some cluttery lawn ornament. Karen gave a curt nod, as if concluding the conversation. I'm only looking out for the neighborhood, Mr. Carlyle. Don't take it personally. She turned and strode away. Henry exhaled shakily. He despised conflict. But this felt personal, someone demanding he hide his means of survival as if it were an embarrassing secret. Little did Karen realize how her blunt approach would spark a wave of empathy from neighbors who wouldn't stand by and watch Henry be bullied. Word of Karen's confrontation with Henry spread like wildfire through Meadowlark Creeks. Some overheard the exchange from across the street. Others learned details from Henry's quiet admission to a friend who visited. Soon, the local community forum buzzed with posts titled Oxygen Tank Harassment or Leave Mr. Carlyle Alone. Paula Jenkins, who lived 2 doors down from Henry, posted a heartfelt message. Henry's medical equipment is vital. Let's not let petty aesthetics threaten his health. If the HOA or certain residents push for removal, we must stand behind him. Comments flooded in, many calling Karen's stance cruel. Some offered Henry possible solutions, like a small, ventilated cupboard or a wooden lattice. None believed he should be forced to hide it at risk to his comfort. The HOA board found itself in a delicate spot. Officially, they had no desire to penalize Henry. Yet Karen's demands for some standard of concealment lingered. Ms. Green and Mr. Lowe tried to find middle ground, emailing Henry with the suggestion of a partial wooden screen or something that wouldn't hamper the tank's ventilation. Henry was open but needed someone to help design it. Many neighbors volunteered, including Diane Mahoney, a retired carpenter's daughter who had a knack for woodworking. She believed they could build a tasteful structure that let air flow while shielding the tank from direct view, if Henry wished. Behind the scenes, Karen fumed that her calls for a strict approach weren't being heeded quickly. She threatened further action, possibly rallying other residents who cared about property values. But the public sentiment was overwhelmingly in Henry's favor. If Karen insisted on pushing, she risked revealing just how heartless her crusade truly was. Regardless, a small group of neighbors was already making plans to help Henry, determined not to let Karen's negativity overshadow compassion. Within days, a handful of concerned neighbors formed an impromptu porch aid committee. They met in Diane Mahoney's garage to sketch possible designs for a wooden cabinet or shield that could hide Henry's tank from the street while providing enough airflow and easy access. Henry, grateful but overwhelmed, gave them the basic dimensions of his oxygen cylinder and the space on his porch. Diane took the lead, brandishing a pencil and measuring tape. The key is ventilation. Oxygen is flammable under certain conditions, so we can't enclose it fully. We'll incorporate slats or a lattice pattern. Also, Henry needs to reach the dials easily. Another neighbor, Brian Shields, suggested adding a hinged door on the side. He can open it quickly, adjust the flow, or move the tank if needed. We can add a little handle. Paula recommended a removable top, just in case maintenance was required. The group agreed, brainstorming aesthetic touches, maybe painting it in the same hue as Henry's porch trim, and affixing small planters or floral motifs so it looked more like a decorative piece than a medical fixture. Diane estimated the cost, around a few $100s for lumber, hinges, paint, plus some extra for decorative elements. By the following day, a fundraiser spontaneously arose on the neighborhood forum. Contributions poured in. Some gave $5, others $50, seeing it as a chance to stand up for Henry. Soon, the committee had enough to buy quality materials. The plan was to build something truly charming, a piece that exemplified the community's spirit rather than cowering to Karen's demands. When Henry heard of these efforts, tears welled in his eyes. He insisted he didn't want to burden anyone financially, but the neighbors insisted. It was their way of telling him he was valued, that Meadowlark Creeks stood for kindness, not petty cruelty. The stage was set for a remarkable demonstration of unity, all triggered by Karen's relentless push for appearances. While the neighbors planned Henry's oxygen cabinet, Karen sensed her efforts were being sidelined. She noticed the enthusiastic posts praising the design project. Furious, She claimed it was an attempt to turn the neighborhood into an oxygen tank storage facility. She posted on the HOA forum, "We are enabling the eyesore by building an oversized box. Will it not be equally unsightly?" The response from residents was harsh. Multiple comments derided her callous approach, pointing out that it was a simple, small cabinet to help an elderly man. Some scolded her for ignoring compassion. Karen retorted that compassion does not override the uniform standard we must maintain. She ended with a threat. If the final structure didn't match the color palette or design rules, she'd push for it to be torn down. Marcia Green, observing the forum meltdown, privately messaged Karen, urging her to let the project proceed. The HOA board was already willing to accept a tasteful enclosure. Instead of calming down, Karen grew more entrenched, resentful that she, the unofficial compliance queen, was being told to stand aside. She vowed to inspect the final product personally. Behind the scenes, Karen contemplated more extreme tactics. Perhaps she could push an emergency bylaw update banning visible medical apparatus. But she lacked the board's support. She considered filing a formal complaint with the city code enforcement, claiming some invented safety violation. Yet that seemed tenuous. Her frustration simmered, every passing day intensifying her feeling that the community was uniting against her. Little did she realize that by fueling hostility, she was forging a stronger alliance among neighbors determined to shield Henry from her meddling. The more she raged, the more impetus they had to finalize the oxygen cabinet and prove that empathy would triumph. One Saturday morning, about 10 neighbors gathered in Diane Mahoney's driveway for a build day. Lumbers, nails, a saw, and paint cans were laid out. A sense of camaraderie filled the air. Some folks had never done carpentry, but they were eager to help. Henry arrived briefly, greeting them with a weak smile, though he couldn't stay long outdoors due to breathing difficulties. He thanked everyone profusely, his gratitude shining through weary eyes. Diane guided the group with careful instructions, measuring each plank for the frame. Brian hammered the crossbeams, while Paula measured the lattice inserts that would serve as vented side panels. Another volunteer, Shelley, painted the outside panels in a soft cream hue that matched Henry's porch trim. Then came the finishing touches, a small hinge door on the front, plus cutouts near the top for extra airflow. They broke for sandwiches at noon, laughing about how a month ago, most of them barely knew each other beyond polite waves. Now, they were collectively building a piece of furniture for a neighbor in need. The petty hostility from Karen seemed a distant annoyance amid the joyous atmosphere. By late afternoon, the structure was nearly complete. A final flourish involved attaching small window boxes on each side, where they could plant colorful flowers. Paula suggested pansies or petunias, something easy to care for yet vibrant. This decorative flair ensured the box wouldn't look industrial. It would be as much a display of neighborly affection as a practical covering for the oxygen tank. As dusk approached, they loaded the assembled pieces onto a pickup truck, ready to install it on Henry's porch the next day. Despite sore arms and paint-stained clothes, everyone felt a surge of pride. A single day of group effort had produced something that would hopefully stand as a testament to the neighborhood's better nature. Sunday morning, they reconvened at Henry's house. He watched from his rocking chair, oxygen hose draped around his neck. Carefully, Diane, Brian, and Paula positioned the cabinet at the far corner of the porch, ensuring it fit snugly against the house's siding. They tested opening the hinge door, verifying Henry could easily slide the tank in or out if needed. The top had a removable panel for service access. The sides boasted the latticed vents. Next to it, the small flower boxes awaited soil and seedlings. Henry tentatively placed his oxygen cylinder inside, hooking the tubing through a small cutout near the top so it extended inside to his living room. They all listened. No hissing leaks, no awkward angles. The fit was perfect. A rush of relief and delight swept over the group. Henry's smile was genuine, watery eyes reflecting gratitude. He tapped the door lightly. "This is beautiful. I can't believe you all did this for me." The finishing touch, Paula and a few neighbors transplanted bright petunias and geraniums into the boxes, their colorful blossoms framing the newly installed cabinet. From the street, one might see only a tidy structure with decorative flowers, blending seamlessly with the porch. The tank itself was concealed, yet fully accessible for Henry's daily needs. "Thank you," Henry whispered, voice trembling. You've made me feel so cared for. And I can breathe easily out here, no matter who passes by. The volunteers each gave him a gentle pat on the shoulder or a warm grin. Photos were snapped to commemorate the moment. In an impromptu show of solidarity, they gathered for a group picture on the porch, Henry smiling at the center. But even as they celebrated, the knowledge of Karen's imminent reaction lingered. Would she try to find fault in this thoughtful design? The neighbors believed the structure complied with all codes: tasteful color, safe ventilation, no protrusion beyond the porch's footprint. The only question remained: how far would Karen go to maintain her crusade against Henry's medical equipment? Karen heard rumors that Henry's porch now had some big wooden box. She set out the next day, midday, to see it for herself. Approaching from the sidewalk, she spied the new enclosure, partially obscured by the porch railing and those bright flowers in the small boxes. Her lips thinned. Indeed, it looked well-crafted, matching Henry's house trim. The oxygen tank was no longer visible at all. In typical fashion, Karen marched right up the porch steps, ignoring basic courtesy. Henry, resting in his rocking chair with the porch door open, coughed softly, turning to see her. "Karen," he said wearily, "what can I do for you?" Her eyes flicked over the structure. She tried the handle, finding it latched. "So you built some giant contraption. I suppose you think this solves the issue." Henry inhaled through his nasal cannula, keeping calm. "My neighbors helped. It conceals the tank, keeps it ventilated. The HOA knows about it." Karen pursed her lips. "But it's still an addition to the exterior. Did you get formal architectural approval? Usually we must submit plans for any structure." Henry shrugged gently. "Diane said she followed the guidelines. Same color scheme, no greater footprint. We only built an enclosure to hide what you called an eyesore." Karen scowled. "I'll check with the board. This might still violate the no freestanding structures without a permit clause. Flowers or not, I suspect it's unapproved." Henry's patience frayed. "Look, I'm just trying to live with dignity. This is a solution that helps me keep oxygen on hand, out of plain sight. Isn't that what you wanted?" Karen bristled. "I want compliance. I'll be in touch." She pivoted, descending the steps in a huff. Henry sighed heavily, heart pounding from the tension. Did she truly intend to tear down the enclosure? The neighbors had poured so much effort into making it both functional and visually appealing. If she forced an official crackdown, the entire block might erupt in backlash. But Karen was relentless. He settled inside, bracing for the next wave of conflict. True to her word, Karen filed a complaint with the HOA board about Henry's new porch addition. She claimed it was akin to building a shed, which typically required an architectural review. She also alleged potential safety hazards. Over email, she demanded an immediate inspection, threatening further actions if the board didn't act. Marcia Green convened an urgent board meeting to discuss. By now, the members were exasperated with Karen's campaign. They had witnessed the wave of community support for Henry. Many had seen the new enclosure themselves, finding it tasteful and unimposing. Ms. Green and Mr. Lowe decided to visit Henry's porch personally, measuring the dimensions, verifying it didn't exceed normal guidelines. They checked how it was attached, discovering it was freestanding, not permanently altering the porch structure. The color matched. Ventilation was evidently accounted for, addressing any hazard concerns. At the next official session, the board reviewed a short presentation by Ms. Green, including photos of the enclosure. The conclusion: it complied with the spirit of the rules. It wasn't a large storage shed, more of an extended porch fixture, entirely within property lines, with consistent design. The question of architectural approval was moot. The board could retroactively approve such a minor addition, especially given it served a legitimate medical function. Karen, in attendance, seethed as Ms. Green recommended a quick vote to formally approve Henry's enclosure. Another board member seconded. The motion carried unanimously. Karen lacked a seat, so she had no direct vote. Applause rippled from some neighbors who'd come to witness. Karen, red-faced, stormed out before the meeting ended. With that official acceptance, the structure gained an unassailable standing. Henry's oxygen tank was recognized, not as a violation, but as a rightful accommodation. In effect, Karen's complaint had sealed its legitimacy. The neighborhood's moral stance was clear. Compassion outranked her petty aesthetic demands. Publicly thwarted, Karen turned to more underhanded tactics. Over the following days, she spread rumors that Henry's oxygen use posed a fire risk, ominously warning neighbors that any spark could explode the canister. She posted frantic messages on the community forum, referencing obscure articles about oxygen mishaps. But the forum moderators quickly flagged her posts as misleading. People who read them realized the new enclosure was well ventilated and posed no unusual threat. Next, Karen began pestering Henry's immediate neighbors, pressing them to join a petition to remove dangerous medical tanks from communal site. Most turned her away. Some told her off, outraged that she'd stooped to scaremongering. She confronted the Johnson family next door, claiming their property was within blast range if Henry's tank leaked. The Johnsons consulted the local fire department, which assured them that a standard portable oxygen cylinder, stored properly, was not an explosive hazard. The Johnsons shut their door on Karen. In her desperation, Karen even attempted to call the city's code enforcement, lodging a complaint that Henry's porch structure might violate building codes. However, an inspector visited and found no issues. The vented box complied with guidelines for flammable materials, and Henry's usage was well within normal medical accommodations. Another dead end for Karen's vendetta. As these efforts failed, Karen's frustration turned to bitterness. She felt betrayed by the HOA, spurned by neighbors. Her illusions of being the guardian of neighborhood standards were crumbling. Meanwhile, the daily reality was that Henry sat peacefully on his porch, oxygen tank discreetly housed in a cabinet brimming with cheerful flowers. The entire fiasco only amplified the neighbors' unity, eager to shield Henry from further harassment. Henry's days grew brighter since the enclosure was installed. He no longer felt self-conscious about placing his oxygen tank in plain sight. The warm companionship from neighbors, who had rallied to build it, reminded him he wasn't alone in Meadowlark Creeks. Many dropped by with small gifts or just to chat. He found himself breathing not just with literal oxygen, but with a renewed sense of belonging. Each morning, he'd settle on the porch with a cup of tea, the box of flowers just steps away, quietly humming with the flow of oxygen. Sometimes, children biking on the sidewalk waved, calling, "Hi, Mr. Carlisle." He would wave back, feeling a pang of gratefulness that Karen's negativity hadn't driven him into isolation. Physically, his condition was stable, though not improving. COPD was a harsh ailment. But psychologically, he felt more at peace. The weight of worry that Karen's next move might strip him of convenience had lifted. The board's endorsement and neighbors' unwavering support formed a protective barrier. Karen's name had become a cautionary whisper, not a looming threat. Occasionally, Henry reflected on how one person's cruelty had triggered such an outpouring of kindness. Without Karen's complaint, he might never have realized how beloved he was. The enclosure turned into a symbol of collective empathy. He considered writing a thank you letter to each volunteer, but they insisted no thanks was needed. Across the street, Karen lingered behind curtains, likely stewing in defeat. Henry tried not to harbor hatred for her. He pitted her narrow worldview, valuing appearances over well-being. He hoped, in time, she might soften. But the tension remained. For now, the enclosure stood tall, a testament that Meadowlark Creeks refused to let superficial demands overshadow a senior citizen's dignity. One mild afternoon, a month after the enclosure's completion, Henry was inside napping. A sudden clatter startled him awake. Outside, he heard raised voices. Struggling to stand, he grabbed his walker, shuffling to the porch. He found Karen, apparently having tripped on the porch steps. She lay sprawled at the foot of Henry's porch, wincing in pain. The cause was unclear, maybe a loose shoelace or an unnoticed crack in the pavement. But Karen, disheveled, glared up at Henry. "Your steps are unsafe," she sputtered, red-faced. Henry, alarmed at seeing a potential injury, tried to help. "Are you hurt? Let me call someone." Karen refused his hand, struggling to her feet with shaky limbs. She insisted she was fine, brushing off dust from her blazer. She grimaced at her scuffed knee, then turned an accusatory glare at Henry. "You should maintain your walkway properly. This is a liability." Henry swallowed frustration. The steps were in good repair. No neighbor had tripped on them in years. "I can have them checked," he replied calmly, though he suspected the real cause was Karen's own misstep. "Do you need me to call a doctor?" Karen huffed. "I'm not incompetent. If I'm injured, you'll hear from my lawyer." Then, eyeing the enclosure, she added a cold remark. "Your porch is quite cluttered, after all." She pivoted and hobbled away, face twisted in anger or perhaps humiliation. Shaken, Henry sank into his porch chair. What had just happened? He considered reaching out to the HOA about the step. But realistically, the steps were fine. Many neighbors used them with no issues. He dreaded that Karen might exploit this incident to stir more trouble. But ironically, her tumble, caused by her own carelessness, only further tarnished her image. When word spread, neighbors concluded it was cosmic irony. Attempting to harass Henry on his own porch ended in a minor comeuppance. Nevertheless, the fear that Karen might retaliate again lingered. Henry resolved to remain cautious, though he refused to be cowed into giving up his porch or his new enclosure. In the wake of Karen's stumble, a sense of exasperation rippled through Meadowlark Creeks. Some neighbors joked privately that karma had intervened. Others worried Karen might file a frivolous lawsuit against Henry, though none had sympathy for such an action. The majority of residents had grown weary of her constant negativity. Even those who once valued her vigilance in upholding standards saw she was crossing ethical lines. The HOA board, for its part, quietly assured Henry they would side with him if any legal claim arose over the porch steps. Mr. Lowe visited him, remarking that the steps looked normal, no code violation. He documented them with photos, just in case. Meanwhile, Ms. Green encouraged Henry to remain calm. "The community stands with you. Don't worry about her threats." Karen, nursing a bruised knee and wounded pride, minimized her public appearances. She posted a few more gripes on the HOA forum about hazardous walkways, but responses were scornful. "We all see you tried to harass an old man and tripped. Let it go." She retreated, her attempts at intimidation failing. Over time, the daily life of Meadowlark Creeks returned to its usual calm rhythms. The oxygen cabinet continued to delight passers-by with its neat floral arrangement. Henry's fear receded, replaced by relief. The line between him and Karen was drawn. She'd lost any moral high ground. Neighbors who might previously have avoided involvement now recognized the cruelty in her crusade. Though tensions existed below the surface, it seemed the major battle had passed. Karen's initial complaint, the abrupt standoff, and the communal solution all pointed to a new normal, an acceptance that personal medical needs trumped superficial uniformity. Yet one final chapter of this saga remained, prompted by an unexpected turn of Henry's health and a surprising gesture from the community. Late autumn brought cooler nights. Henry's COPD flared unpredictably. One day, as he relaxed on the porch, an intense coughing fit struck. Struggling to breathe, he nearly collapsed. A quick-thinking neighbor, Shelley, saw him from across the street and rushed over, calling 911. By the time paramedics arrived, Henry was pale, barely able to speak. They stabilized him with a portable oxygen mask, then loaded him into the ambulance for further tests at the hospital. News spread swiftly across the neighborhood. Many worried Henry might not bounce back easily from such a serious episode. Karen, hearing the sirens, stayed indoors, ignoring the commotion. Over the next few days, Henry remained hospitalized. A close friend of his, Ms. Daniels, visited him and updated neighbors. The doctor said he needed more robust oxygen therapy at home, possibly an even bigger cylinder or a more advanced machine. If so, he'd be relying heavily on that porch placement for quick relief whenever he wanted fresh air. The neighbors resolved that, upon Henry's return, they'd ensure no obstacle hindered his medical setup. They preemptively expanded the wooden cabinet to accommodate a larger tank. Diane and Brian used leftover materials to add an extra few inches of width, ensuring the new system fit snugly. They double-checked the door's hinge strength and airflow. In effect, they prepared for Henry's condition to require an even more integral piece of equipment. Karen, scowling from her window, witnessed the flurry of activity. It galled her that the eyesore box might grow bigger. But at this point, any attempt to protest would brand her heartless, attacking a man who'd just returned from the hospital. She fumed quietly, powerless in the face of a unified community. Meanwhile, the neighbors waited anxiously for Henry's discharge, determined to show him that Meadowlark Creeks was a place of compassion. After a week in the hospital, Henry came home in a wheelchair, oxygen tubes still in place. The doctors insisted he limit strenuous activity and keep consistent high-flow oxygen. He was weaker, but brightened at the sight of a small welcoming committee outside his house. Paula, Brian, and Diane had prepared a get-well banner. Shelley offered to help carry Henry inside. The new cabinet extension was ready, the flowers replaced with hardy autumn mums, adding a splash of seasonal color. Henry's eyes teared up at the warmth. "I can't thank you all enough," he managed, voice raspy. "You've made it so I can keep living here comfortably." They ushered him onto his porch, showing how the expanded enclosure easily fit a bigger cylinder. Freed from medical complexities, Henry could focus on healing. Karen observed from half a block away, ignoring the group's cheerful greeting. She had no desire to congratulate an expansion of the cabinet. Another neighbor, Ms. Reynolds, approached Karen, gently suggesting she bury the hatchet. Karen refused, turning her back. She saw the entire scene as an affront to her desire for a pristine aesthetic. The neighbor shook her head, returning to help Henry settle in. The next day, Ms. Green from the HOA dropped by to check on Henry. She commended the improved enclosure, remarking that the design team had outdone themselves. "We might put this in a future community newsletter to show creative solutions for special needs," she mused. Henry murmured a modest thanks, still adjusting to his new oxygen routine. Outside, the crisp fall air carried the scent of turning leaves. A hush lay over Meadowlark Creeks, with many residents feeling a renewed sense of closeness. The tension with Karen lurked on the outskirts, but after everything, most believed she had no further leverage. Henry's safe return overshadowed petty quarrels. As the holiday season approached, the HOA planned its annual Holiday Stroll event, an evening where neighbors decorated houses with lights and opened their doors for a progressive dessert sampling. Typically, Karen adored this event, using it to critique or applaud each home's decor. But this year, the focus shifted. Inspired by Henry's story, the HOA announced a special philanthropic twist, encouraging donations to a local seniors assistance foundation. Many residents decided to set up small donation jars on their decorated lawns. On the night of the stroll, Henry, though frail, insisted on participating at least from his porch. Volunteers strung lights around his enclosure, weaving them around the flower boxes. The oxygen cabinet glowed softly under the porch light. A sign reading, "Love Lives Here," was placed next to it. Henry sat bundled in a blanket, greeting passers-by with a gentle wave. People stopped to wish him well, dropping money into the donation jar. Children handed him homemade holiday cards, featuring doodles of an old man with an oxygen tank, a surprising but heartfelt symbol. Karen, wearing a forced smile, roamed the neighborhood. She grimly noted how each mention of Henry's oxygen box radiated positivity. She found no support for her complaints. Instead, people raved about how well the enclosure fit the holiday decor. At one point, Ms. Green introduced Henry to a local reporter from the city paper covering the event. The reporter asked how he felt about the neighbor's creation. Henry answered with teary gratitude, praising Meadowlark Creeks as a place that had my back when it mattered. Thus, the entire fiasco turned into a highlight of the holiday stroll. Instead of the unsightly offense Karen predicted, the oxygen enclosure became a seasonal centerpiece of compassion. Cameras snapped pictures of Henry's lights, shared widely on social media. The comedic irony was that Karen's initial complaint, aiming to hide or remove the tank, led to a public demonstration of unity, shining even brighter. In the months that followed, Henry's health remained delicate, but his heart stayed strong. He continued to rely on the porch enclosure, grateful for the easy access that spared him from dragging equipment in and out. The seasonal flowers changed from mums to winter pansies, then to spring petunias, reflecting the evolving months. Each time he ventured onto the porch, he marveled at the caring hearts that had built such a thoughtful structure. Karen never publicly apologized, though she largely retreated from crusading about community standards. The near-unanimous condemnation of her stance, plus her humiliating tumble on Henry's porch, left her with little appetite for further confrontation. Some neighbors sensed she might be considering moving away, though no official listing surfaced. In quiet corners, people gossiped that she'd lost the moral authority she once wielded. For the rest of Meadowlark Creeks, Henry's enclosure remained a symbol of what was best in community life, neighbors rising above petty rules to show genuine empathy. The HOA even updated their guidelines, clarifying that medically necessary porch equipment is permitted, provided it's safe and reasonably integrated into the home's exterior. They cited Henry's box as a prime example. Looking back, Henry often felt a complicated mixture of gratitude and sadness. Gratitude that the community took a stand, sadness that one person's hostility had triggered the conflict. Yet time and again, he concluded that if Karen's cruelty was the spark, the fire of kindness that followed was unstoppable. Her attempts to shame him for needing oxygen had inadvertently rallied the entire block around him. And so, Meadowlark Creeks carried on. The older man in the porch chair never again faced demands to hide his lifeline. Instead, his neighbor's handcrafted solution thrived, blossoming with each season's flowers, reminding all who pass that compassion, once lit, can overshadow even the most unyielding attempts to preserve appearances over humanity.